All right. Now, just guys, we have done factorising, but we haven't factorised trinomials. The only trinomials we've done is by perfect squares, and we've also done dots as well. Now, this week we are looking at factorising trinomials. We're looking at factorising by grouping. They're the two things I'm going to cover today in today's lesson. We're going to then look at completing the square, which is something you're going to readdress in Year 10, but it's something that students can struggle with a bit. So you really need to tune in this week because completing the square is something that students struggle with in Year 10 and even 11, and so on. What have we looked at so far? Well, we've looked at expanding. I guess the FOIL method. We expand the things first, and then we expand the things on the outside, and then we do on the inside, and then we do the last two things. Okay, so we've looked at expanding. We've also looked at factorising. Okay, just taking out the highest common factor. And we've also looked at the null factor law, how to solve equations. So if I have two things equated to 0, then solving those. But a lot of the time what we need, and we've also looked at DOPS, where if I have two expressions here, a squared minus b squared, and that factorises to a plus b, a minus b. So we have done some factorising, but what happens if we've got a trinomial? For starters, we sort of tend to introduce this by factorising by grouping. Now, when we're grouping two things at a time. So 2 things times 2 is 4 things. Now, forget about this crap. Okay. This is what I'm talking about, grouping. Now, let's have a look. We're factorising this by grouping. Now, the whole point of this is that when we factorise trinomials, what we want to do is we have tri meaning 3 terms. And what we do is we make 3 terms into 4 terms, and then we group them. So we can only really do grouping when we have 4 terms. So, for example, what we might have is this is what we will have. We'll have the trinomial x squared plus x minus 6, and we need to factorise that. Now, as you can see, tri meaning 3. So there's 3 terms here. What we do is we actually break this up when factorising into 3x minus 2x, so then we can do grouping. Now, let me just show you grouping just quickly. Okay? What we're going to do is we need to group 2 terms and take their highest common factor. So what I'm going to, and it doesn't always happen to be the first 2 terms, but it just so happens to be in this example that it is. So let's have a look at these first 2 terms. What is, if I was to group these 2 together and then group these 2 together, what is the highest common factor of these 2? X. Okay, so let's take out x as the highest common factor of that. So therefore, what we're doing, so this would be example 1, which I hope you're doing in your books as we go, or at least getting this down, and this is factorising by grouping. So we take out x as the highest common factor, and then we open up a bracket. What goes inside of there? X times something is x squared. So that would be x times x would be x squared. And x times something is 3x, so then that is 3. Okay, so we've done the first thing. We've grouped the first thing. We've grouped this. All right, now that we've done that, what we want to do is we want to take out the highest common factor of minus 2x and 6. What is the highest common factor? It could be, it's 2, or it could be minus 2. Both of them are highest common factors. Minus 2 would go into both of them, wouldn't it? Now, I guess the idea is, I'm going to try to take out minus 2. Okay, so I've got minus 2, and then I'm opening up a bracket. Minus 2 times x is minus 2x. And minus 2 times positive 3 is going to give me minus 6. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Is that okay? All right. Now, what they both have, if I was to multiply x plus 3 by x, then that's going to be this expression here. And if I'm going to multiply x plus 3 by minus 2, that's going to give me this expression here. But they both, can you see that they both share an x plus 3? So therefore, factorising this, and we started to have a look at some of these. So I'm now factorising this expression, x plus 3, and the other one is what?
X minus 2.
X minus 2. Now we've just factorised a trinomial. We've done it by grouping, by making that by making that term, or 3 terms, into 4. This is what we started with. We started with this. We started with a trinomial. We've then split this trinomial up into 4 terms, this middle term, this x term. Okay, what we've done is we've said that okay, let's break that up as to 3x minus 2x. That is the equivalent of x, isn't it? Now we've split this up, and that's what we've done. We've done that, and then we've factorised by grouping. We can only group when there's 4 expressions, so that's essentially what we've done. Now that's the first one. We're going to do some more. Okay, are there any questions so far? Now I'm going to show you a bit of a shortcut to this. Louis, just one sec. I'll just pause. So I'm going to get you to have a go at this first one. Remember, grouping. We've got 4 expressions. You need to group 2 of them together. It's not always the first 2, but often it is. So we need to group these 2, and I get you need to take the highest common factor of those, and group them how we did. So have a go at that. I'll just pause this, and we'll go through it in a minute or 2. So just quickly with this, we're using grouping, so I'm taking out my highest common factor of the first 2, which is x times x plus 2. Now the idea is, when you're grouping, the idea is that you need to, and this will always be the case, if you're going to effectively group, then that x plus 2, I need to actually get x plus 2 again. Otherwise I can't, they're not a highest common factor. So therefore I've got x plus 2 plus. So look, I could almost write x plus 2 in here, but the highest common factor of those is 3. So when you find the highest common factor, 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 2 is 6. And now, as you can see, that both of those expressions share an x plus 2. In other words, the highest common factor is x plus 2. So that's like saying, okay, I'm going to take my highest common factor out the front, which is x plus 2, and then I'm going to multiply that by x and 3. X plus 3. And now we have factorised. Start here. Grouping is basically what we're doing, but I'm going to show you a bit of a shortcut so you don't have to do grouping. Now, if you've ever got 4 expressions, always look for grouping. If you're given 4 expressions, look for grouping. But if you've given a trinomial, I'm just going to show you a little bit of a shortcut. Now, it says here that what we've actually got is we've got this A value, we've got a B value, and a C value. Now, for starters, you're actually going to be looking at monic trinomials, which means that this A value is 1. Mono. Have you heard of monorail? What does that mean? One rail, doesn't it? Mono. So this is a monic trinomial, and later on we might have to deal, and it gets a little bit more challenging, that we have non-monic trinomials. In other words, that number there is not a 1. But for the time being, we're going to be dealing with x squared plus bx. In other words, that value there is 1. Now, what you need to do is we need to find 2 numbers for a monic trinomial, which gives you c. Okay, so this constant value, that's the number. 2 numbers which multiply to give that number, but they add to give the coefficient of x. Okay, now I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but until we go through an example, and then what we do is effectively we're actually doing grouping in a way, but it's a shortcut to grouping. Let me go for an example. Now, let's have a look. We've got a is equal to 1. That's the coefficient of x squared. For the time being, we're going to deal with just coefficients of 1.
Wait, sorry, sir. What was the formula for it?
The formula, just resume that. So b is equal to 7 and c is equal to 10. So what we're doing is we're factorising a monic trinomial with a is equal to 1. Now, what we're going to do is we've got to come up with our numbers. Now, there's only going to be one case. We need 2 numbers. Now, I'm going to call those 2 numbers. Let's just put a little blank there. They multiply to give what?
10.
To give 10. Okay, and then I need those two numbers which multiply to give 10, and then they're going those same two numbers. Now, be careful, they can be positive and negative as well, and they add to give 7. What are those two numbers? 5 and 2. Be careful, sometimes it's not, it can be a negative number. So it is 5 times 2 is 10, and 5 plus 2 is 7. Now, effectively, what we're doing is we're doing a bit of a shortcut to this. Is now that we've found those two numbers, we're now changing a trinomial into something with 4 expressions. So, in other words, what we're doing is we're going, okay, these are our magic numbers. So this 7x in the middle is actually going to become 2 expressions. It's going to become x squared, and that 7x becomes, well, 5x plus 2x. And then we've got the plus 10. That didn't go anywhere. Now, what we're doing there is exactly what I showed you. We're actually then grouping. But because you found that those two numbers, you're going to see a bit of a pattern soon. You're going to be, hang on a minute, it's just this and this. So we'll go through. But I needed to sort of show you grouping first. So what we're going to do now is take out the highest common factor here. I'm going to get you to do that, please. Take out the highest common factor there. Take out the highest common factor there. Use grouping, and I'd like you to factorise this expression, please. We've found our two magical numbers. And Tom, I'll just come around now. I'm just going to resume this. Shh. So let's have a look. The two numbers are 5 and 2. We've then split up this trinomial into 4 expressions, so that 7x becomes 5x plus 2x. We've then factorised by grouping. And then from there, we have a highest common factor of x plus 5. We then write it like so. Now the trick is that if I multiply and I find my two numbers which give to 10 and add to 7, then they're going to be my two numbers plus x. Okay? That's the trick. Now let's have a look at this one. Let's go through now we've been through grouping. We've been through a few examples of grouping. This time, let's try and talk through this one. We need two numbers which multiply to give what? 10. This next one. Minus 10. So we need two numbers which multiply to give minus 10. And those same two numbers must add to give what? Negative 3. Yes. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to use... Now, look, other classes might be taught some slightly different method, but effectively it's the same thing. Remember that this grouping, if you see 4 expressions, you always try grouping first. And really, that's what we're doing when we're factorising a trinomial. But the shortcut is, let's find those two numbers. And so I'm going to get you to do that, please. Have a think about it. Remember that when I'm adding two numbers together, if I multiply a negative and a positive, the result is what? Negative. So I know that one of those numbers has to be positive and the other one has to be negative. But which one has to be greater? If I'm adding them together and the result's negative, then which one's greater? Which whole number's greater? The negative one? The negative one. Yeah? Okay, so what are my two numbers?
Negative 5 and 2.
Okay, so negative 5 times positive 2 is negative 10. Yes, that is correct. And therefore, my next two numbers are negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Yes, we're right. So now, the shortcut is, though, now we could go ahead and split that middle term, b, into two terms and factorise by grouping. Or what we could do is we could just, I guess you're going to eventually recognise this pattern. But you know what? We'll do it by grouping one more. That's x squared. And what does that middle term split up into? Negative 5x plus 2x. You can never go wrong this way. But if you start recognising that pattern, you're not going to lose any marks for doing the shortcut. Minus 10, absolutely. So now what we're doing is we're going to group them. So we're going to take the highest common factor. I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to get you just to quickly do that. Take out that highest common factor. But you'll probably notice that we probably could have skipped this step and gone straight to the answer, just like we did before. All right, so I'll give you just a sort of 30 minutes. All right, so getting back to it, we've done grouping. I've grouped them. And look, as it turns out, it's x. Here are my numbers that I come up with first term. X minus 5 and x plus 2. So I guess the shortcut is if I come up with those two numbers which multiply to give C, but they add to give B, those two numbers are here, aren't they? 1, 2. Can you see that? And look, maybe you don't see it now, but I guess the more and more you do these, you're going to go, okay, two numbers which multiply to give this and add to give this. And you can actually do that without having to do grouping. But that's why we do it. That's actually what we're doing, but it's a shortcut to that. All right, I'm going to get you now, for starters, remember when we said, when we have a number 2 there, we can actually factorise this, but what might we do first for this second example? Yes?
I think you factorise everything, so because 2 is a common factor,
Yep.
you factorise it all.
So good.
And then when you group it, you just put the 2 in front.
That's right. Absolutely. So take the 2 out the front is my hint for this. Now I'm going to pause this now, and I'd like you guys to have a go at this. Remember, for the first one, I need two numbers which multiply to give negative 8, and they add to give positive 2. And for this one, I can't do that because this is what we call a non-monic trinomial. So what we have to do in this case, we need to take 2 out as a common factor. Have a go at those. I'm very confident that if you can do those, then we're right to have a go at the exercises without too much more. Now, if you want to do it the long way and do it by grouping, that's fine as well. Well, I think that once you recognise where the grouping comes from, and then if you saw 4 expressions, you try grouping, I still think that you're best just going by 2 numbers which multiply to give negative 8. So that's like 4 and minus 2. And then just, so it's x minus 4? No, it's x plus 4. X plus 4, x minus 4. Yeah. Yep, that's it. Yes. Those two numbers have to be the same. So negative 2 plus 4. Two numbers to get to 8.
So what do you do in that
Okay, so these are my 2 numbers. That means that I'm splitting up that thing about x into negative 2x. Yeah. Positive 4x. Those are the 2 numbers. That's right. You see there, those are
Yeah, I don't want to spend $10. I've had school for $6,000
Hands up if you're done. I don't think there'll be too many of you.
Yes, I'm done.
Henry, you're done with both of them? Come along.
Oh, I'm not done with both.
Both of them, please. I want both done.
Plus 2x minus 8. Where the hell does x go?
Wait, do that.
It's the 2x. I'm offering money. You pay for it. Yeah, but don't go back.
We're looking for two numbers, which is
Sorry? You do a dollar donation rack. Then you're welcome to. You don't even need to ask. You don't even need to ask.
now I'm going to finish up. There's two questions.
I did it. Anything to get away
Smells like strong sweat.
Sorry, I can't smell
All right, now. I think you guys are getting this pretty well for the most part. It's something which can take a little while to click. Zachariah, take your seat. Shh. I don't know what exchange is going on here, but that's all right. Okay, lads. Shh. Tom, you had a question? Oh no, that was... Resume now. So what we need is two numbers which multiply to give C, which is -8, and they add to give B, which is 2. So once again, I guess set it out like this until you are really confident of this process. And you're not going to be confident yet, or even today or tomorrow, probably not even by the end of the week. Okay, it's some of you might take a little bit longer than others, which is fine. And I've got those two numbers which add to give 2. So those two numbers, Okay, so those two numbers are, just one sec. Those two numbers are what? Will?
They are negative 2 and 4.
So negative 2 and times positive 4, and negative 2 plus positive 4 is going to be equal to 2. Excellent. Now, you should then be able to go, you eventually just go to, okay, factorise, that means that those two numbers, minus 2 and positive 4, that's our answer. Or you can break that up. You can break out that middle expression, x squared. That positive 2x, we make that two terms, minus 2x plus 4x minus 8. And now we're breaking that up into x minus 2, 4x, guys. Anyway, that's your answer. The second one, I won't go anymore because clearly you guys are had enough today. Taking out the common factor, x squared minus x minus 6. Now what you want to do is exactly the same thing. Pretend that 2 didn't exist and factorise what's inside those brackets. So once again, I need to factorise this. I need two numbers which multiply to give negative 6, and they add to give negative 1. What are those two numbers?
Negative 2 and 3.
And positive 2. Yeah, but if I...
Negative 1, you plus.
I was doing it the plus, my bad.
Yeah, it's the other way around because negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Now, I've been through the grouping method 5 or 6 times now with you, so I'm going to go directly to my little shortcut. Now, that 2 hasn't gone anywhere, has it? That 2 still exists, but what does x squared minus x minus 6 factorise to? My two numbers were minus 3 and 2. So it's x minus 3, and the other one is x plus 2. We are now done. We've factorised that. Now that's the shortcut, isn't it? The shortcut is we can go from step 1 to working out those two numbers to then down here. Can you see that? But that 2 doesn't disappear anywhere. All right. Look, I'm going